The coffee was cold by the time I noticed it. That's the kind of detail a man holds on to. Cold coffee and her standing in the doorway of Henshaw's General, one hand on the frame and the other pressed flat to her side like she was steadying herself against something only she could feel. I didn't know who she was then. That came later. What I knew was the look on Prentice Calder's face 3 feet behind her, that wet-lipped patience of a man who's used to waiting out women, because he's learned that's all it takes. Wait, they come around. I'd seen that look before, worn by different men in different towns, but it's the same look. I turned my coffee cup in my hands, felt the clay gone cold, and set it down. My name doesn't matter much to this story. I'll tell you I was 47 years old and riding on a reputation I hadn't earned in 5 years, and a horse I'd bought off a drunk outside Pueblo who needed boot money worse than he needed the animal. Mare named Cora. Good animal. Steady. That's more than I could say for myself at the time. I'd come to Darton Flats following work that turned out not to exist. The mines were played, and the men who'd promised a position were 3 months gone south with someone else's payroll. So I was at Henshaw's drinking cold coffee and calculating how long $12 would last a man who didn't know what came next. 47. And what I had to show for it was Cora, a Winchester that needed a new stock, and the particular kind of pride that keeps a man from asking for help even when he's on the wrong end of needing it. My father would have said that was a character flaw. He'd have been right. Her name was Alina Marsh. Her father was Colonel Ambrose Marsh, retired, who ran the biggest spread in the Darton Basin, and who, 3 years prior, had made the kind of arrangement men of his standing make when they get old and want the future sorted. A partnership with Prentice Calder's family, sealed with the understanding that Alina would become Prentice Calder's wife when the time suited. Nobody'd asked Alina. I learned all this from Henshaw himself, who told it the way men tell things they've told 100 times, flat and fast, with the details worn smooth. He was filling my cup, the hot coffee this time, and watching through the window at Prentice Calder following Alina across the street. "She say yes?" I asked. "Her father said yes," Henshaw said. "That's how it works out here." I looked at him. "You asking or telling?" He shrugged, set the pot down, went back behind his counter. I didn't plan what happened next. I want to be clear on that because I've had it told back to me since in ways that make it sound planned, make it sound like I rode into Darton Flats looking to be somebody's hero, and that is not how it was. What happened was I walked outside because I needed air, and Prentice Calder had Alina by the arm, not rough exactly, but the kind of hold that isn't about affection, the kind that communicates ownership. She was looking at his hand on her arm the way a person looks at something they've learned not to fight in public, a practiced quiet that's worse to see than anger because you know what it cost her. I said, "Afternoon." "Just that." Calder looked at me. He had that kind of face that's handsome in a way that turns mean fast, square jaw and pale eyes, and a mouth that smiled without warming anything above it. "Move along," he said. And I thought about my $12 and my horse with the bad-tempered left hock and my Winchester that needed a new stock. I thought about all the reasons a sensible man moves along. "I'll move when I'm ready," I said. What followed is the kind of thing that sounds like a lot when you tell it and is actually about 4 minutes long when it happens. Words were said. Men came out of the saloon across the way because men always come out when they think something's about to be interesting. Calder's 2 hands, Burl and the one they called Dick's, materialized out of the particular nowhere that hired men come from. I'm not going to dress this up. I got hit. Burl was fast and I was rusty, and I went down on one knee in the dust in front of the whole town of Darton Flats, which is not a distinguished position for a man. But I got back up. That's the part that matters, not that I went down. I went down. That's just a fact. But I got back up and I looked at Prentice Calder and I said, "Let go of her arm." He did not. So I hit him. They ran me out of town that evening. Not formally, no badge, no warrant. Just Calder's men and the unspoken arithmetic of a place where one man owns enough of everything that running another man off is simply a matter of making clear the costs. My coffee got knocked off Henshaw's counter in the confusion. My hat ended up in the street. Cora threw a shoe somewhere in the commotion, and I walked her 3 miles out of Darton Flats in the dark, which gave me time to think about the quality of my decisions. I made camp at a creek I found by sound, Couldn't see it until I was almost in it. Cold night early for the season, the kind of cold that comes down off the mountains before anyone's ready and reminds you that the country does not care about your situation. I got a fire going and sat with my back to a cottonwood and felt my eye swelling shut on the left side and thought, $12, a lame horse, one good eye. I'd been in worse spots. I couldn't immediately recall when, but I told myself I had been. She came at first light. I heard Cora first. The mare lifted her head and her ears went forward, which is how I know something's coming before I can see it. I had the Winchester up before I was fully awake, which tells you something about how a man sleeps when he's been sleeping alone in open country for going on 3 years. Eleanor Marsh came through the cottonwoods on a gray horse, leading a second animal, a bay, saddled, saddlebags packed. She was wearing a riding coat the color of old pine, and she rode like a woman who'd been riding before she could remember not knowing how. She stopped 10 feet away and looked at me. I was unshaven, one-eyed, sitting against a tree with a rifle I'd just pointed at her. "I'm sorry about your eye," she said. "I've had worse." "I brought supplies," she nodded at the saddlebags on the bay. "And that horse, he's sound. Yours needs a week before she's rideable." I didn't say anything for a moment. I was trying to work out the shape of what was happening. "Your father know you're here?" "No." "Calder?" "No." I looked at the packed saddlebags, then at her. The light was still low and gray, and it came through the cottonwood leaves in thin strips, and one of them fell across her face, and she didn't look away from me when I looked at her. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "Yesterday, you didn't need me to do that." "No," she said, "I didn't need you to. You did it anyway." She was quiet a moment. "There's a difference." I should have ridden on. That was the sensible thing. Take the horse, take the supplies, move south before Calder's men could pick up a trail and make the mathematics of yesterday worse than they already were. Instead, I said, "Does your father know what kind of man Calder is?" She got down off her horse, tied both animals to a branch, came and sat on a rock near the fire like we'd been talking for years, and this was simply the next part of a conversation already underway. "My father knows exactly what kind of man Calder is," she said. "He thinks it doesn't matter. And the arrangement is not something I agreed to." She looked at the fire. I looked at her looking at the fire. Her jaw had a set to it, a particular quality of a person who has been patient for a long time because patience was what was available and is now considering whether patience is still the right tool. "I've been waiting," she said, "for someone to stay. Most men take one look at my father's name and Calder's money and decide the math doesn't work." I thought about my $12. "The math doesn't work," I said. She looked at me then, directly, no performance in it. "No," she said, "it doesn't." We rode back into Darton Flats that morning together. I want to tell you it was because I'd thought it through and had a plan, and there was a plan, of a kind. Eleanor knew who held paper on Calder's debts, and she knew which of the men in town had been waiting for an excuse, and she knew where her father's loyalty actually lived underneath the arrangements he'd made when he was afraid of the future. She'd been paying attention for 2 years. She'd just been waiting for a reason to act on it. I was, apparently, the reason. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about that. There is a particular quality to being chosen by a capable woman as the thing that finally tips the scales. It's not exactly comfortable. It requires you to think about whether you're worth what she's betting on you. I thought about it most of the ride in. What happened with Calder and her father and the men whose debts Eleanor knew about is a longer story, and not the one I'm telling. I'll say only that it was resolved, and resolved in a way that left Calder without the standing in Darton Flats he'd counted on, and left Colonel Ambrose Marsh facing a daughter who had, quietly and completely, outmaneuvered every arrangement he'd made on her behalf. The colonel was a hard man. He'd made hard choices his whole life and called them practical and moved on. But he sat in his parlor that evening with Eleanor and me across from him, and he looked at his daughter, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in a while, and something in him went quiet. "He's got nothing," the colonel said, "not mean, just factual." "I know what he has," Eleanor said. Long silence. "You've made up your mind." "Don't make me choose," she said. "I already did." He looked at me. I looked back at him. I didn't have anything to offer him in the way of reassurance because the truth was she was right. I had almost nothing. A sound horse now and a Winchester that still needed a new stock, and a reputation I was rebuilding from zero in a town that had seen me go down on one knee in the dust. What I had was that I'd gotten back up. "Sir," I said, "I'll work for it." He looked at me a long time. Whatever he was looking for, he either found it or decided it didn't matter. He didn't say yes, he just stopped saying no, which for Ambrose Marsh was apparently the same thing. That was 11 years ago. I'm sitting on the porch now, the one I built onto the house 3 winters after we were married when we needed the room. And the light is the long gold light of October evening, the kind that makes everything look like it was worth something. The Darton Basin goes amber and then rose, and then the first cold blue of early dark comes in off the mountains, and Cora, the original Cora, still alive and moving slow in the south pasture, raises her head toward the smell of it. Eleanor comes out with 2 cups, sets one next to my hand without saying anything. She does that. She moves through the world like she knows where everything is supposed to be, and she's simply putting things there. I pick up the cup, hot this time. She stands at the rail looking out at the basin, and the last of the gold light catches the side of her face, and she's thinking about something. I can tell, though I've never been able to tell exactly what. After 11 years, that's still true. There's more to her than I've reached the bottom of, and I expect there always will be. "Calder was through Henshaw's today," she says, heading south. "I heard. He looked tired. He should." She's quiet. Then she puts her hand on my shoulder, not a gesture, just a placement, like setting something down in the place it belongs. And we watch the basin go dark together, the way we do, and I feel the weight of her hand and the heat of the cup and the cold coming in off the mountains, and I think, this is what I got back up for. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. The lamp in the window comes on behind us. She must have left it burning. And its light falls out across the porch boards, yellow and steady, and somewhere out in the pasture Cora moves in the dark and is quiet. That's where it lands. That cup still warm, her hand still there. The light that someone left burning so we wouldn't come home to dark. That's the whole of it.